Hi, I'm Pamela Jaccarino, Editor-in-Chief of Luxe Interiors and Design. Today, we're celebrating the one-year anniversary of DesignTV by SANDOW. From master classes to home tours, Luxe has hosted over 75 segments. We can't wait to bring you more programming, including my new one, Creative Conversations. And in honor of this milestone, today, I throw it back to one of my favorite segments with designer Alessandra Branca. Welcome to Masterclass. Today, I'm speaking with acclaimed interior designer Alessandra Branca. Celebrated for interiors with an inviting flair, Alessandra blends color, pattern, and texture with an abundant sense of joy. Her latest venture is Casa Branca. We'll be hearing more about that in a bit. But first, Alessandra, hi. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Tell us where you are. I assume that you're in Chicago and you've been sheltering in place there. Yes?
I have. I'm at home in my library, and we have, thankfully, my office is a block away, so we take turns going in and being alone in the office, which is kind of interesting. And it's like having the elves leave their work. And we do it physically because many of the things we do are physical. You have to see the color or you have to do whatever. Anyway, so otherwise I've been home and it's been very interesting.
Yeah, I know. We're going to get into that because I know you're a woman that's on the go. You're always on the move. But I want to start off because I feel like we need to start off with something inspiring. We need some Alessandra Branca inspiration to kick it off. And the last time I saw you in real life was in your master bedroom, which you did for the Kips Bay Palm Beach show house. The room was just beautiful and feminine and had this marvelous architectural framework, which was your hand-painted wallpaper lined with de Gournay, which just blew everyone away. And architecture is such a big foundation for you in your decorating work. You work it into graphic elements and carpets and it Kips Bay in the wall mural. But kick us off with that beautiful room and sort of the inspiration
Oh my
behind
God,
it.
that amazing room. It's amazing how that feels like it was 2 years ago.
I
Isn't that
know.
incredible? And it was 2 months ago.
January. It was January, but I know
It was
doesn't feel like
crazy. I've been doing this wonderful collaboration with de Gournay where I chose to do my collection with them as a series of 4 seasonal launches. Each of the seasons are represented differently. The first one was winter, which was Russia, and it was Catherine the Great's influence on design. And we did embroidered fabrics, and we did these amazing hand-painted and embroidered wallpapers, very, very luxe and spectacular. And then when I worked with the creative director, I always knew that summer was going to be this idea. And when I was asked to do the bedroom for Kips Bay, I knew this was the perfect place because it is where summer is essentially eternal. And where the space, it was literally kismet. The whole thing came together and ended up being this really wonderful collaboration between de Gournay, and we gave a room that really was a simpler room and didn't have a tremendous amount of architectural detail. We gave it this sense of architecture, and we did hand-painted over doors and tiles, and we cut everything and installed it. It was just this amazing room. And then I had a wonderful vintage bed, 4-poster bed that I had found years ago, that we brought in, and we also, part of the room is our Casa Branca, which is the fiamma, this design that's sort of a flame or a drip, or whichever way you look at it. It's a wonderfully cut out pattern, or it's a pattern that lends itself to that. So I did the balances in that. And then we had a really beautiful loggia around this room. And instead of doing window treatments, I thought, let's make the window treatments on the outside. So we did a whole series of outdoor portiere done in the Casa Branca stripe, which is an outdoor fabric, and did all these seating areas. And I wanted that bedroom. I mean, move over.
We all wanted that. We all wanted that bedroom. And I think, the collection with that collection with de Gournay was just very unexpected. And you just, that was a room that really resonated with so many people and just stayed with you. And as we're all sheltering at home, I just keep, thinking about that space because it was just extraordinary. It really was.
Well, it was light and fresh, and
It
the
was.
freshness is something that that only comes. And blue and white, of course, is. But I happen to love Portugal, so the azulejos were a natural. They lent themselves to what I wanted to do, and it's really universal. It's a wonderful, design that we have many more layers of it that are not. That was literally a little peek into the collection, which is going to launch in the summer. So that was the start, and it was a pretty good start.
Well, we're definitely gonna get to Casa Branca. If you're just joining us, welcome to Masterclass. I'm in conversation with the fabulous Alessandra Branca. So Alessandra, let's go back to early days. You were born and raised in the great city of Rome, and our hearts are everywhere these days, but really our hearts are so much in Italy.
But you and I are a little bit prejudiced in that department, being Italian.
I actually am married to a wonderful Italian man, where I got my Jaccarino from Sorrento, with my bad Italian accent. But Rome is one of the great cities of the world, where architecture is the foundation of everything. And talk a little bit about how that sense of place, your upbringing there, your parents were academics, so your parents were artists, your grandparents. How does that sort of always stayed, and it's such a big part of who you are? Talk a little bit about that.
I think where you're born imprints you in some way or another, just as someone who's born in the countryside might always yearn to go home, and home could be anywhere in the world as long as it's countryside. In my case, I was born and raised in Rome. My grandfather was art historian and art critic for the Vatican. And I was a hyperactive child, quelle surprise. And so I would be brought with him to, for example, the Vatican while he was working. And this is a very crazy single memory that I have of my upbringing when I was young. And I was telling him, this is many years ago, he's been long gone, that I remembered running in the Vatican library and having to lift myself up to look down onto the tables where you have all these books and objects that are under glass. And he said, "You were 3 years old." And he would take me, I can't believe he did, God bless him, but he would take me and let me run and run and run and run. But something about that has to have entered my mind and it's a seed that was planted. I spent my years all the way through high school. I would walk the streets of Rome. To this day, I still do this. I try to go different ways every time so that I can find new things. And then I would go into churches and I would look at everything, and I would very visual, and I would give myself these tasks. Like I would do a safari. One of them, I totally remember, I must have been 14, and it would be, I had to find all the animals in the architecture that I could find. So what it did is it made me look, but also really see, because one thing is to look, the other is to see. And in this case, in Italy, you're so rewarded if you have any interest in architecture and the color and the light and the life, and everything's on the streets. Interiors are beautiful in Italy, but not the way, they don't have the same tradition that Americans have, or the Brits have, or the French. So everything, and it's a little hard to compete with 15th, 16th century interiors. So it's a little bit different, but you do spend your life seeing things differently. And the classicism, I think, is born of that. It's a structure, it's an outline, and it's a comfortable one for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the most incredible cities. And it's so important that your eye always gets shaped. I think there are things they're embedded in me from my youth. There's rooms that just, they stay with you. So it's really incredible to think that was what, you were surrounded by, and going into the Vatican. I mean, it's
crazy. To me, it was the office. I mean, it was crazy.
That's a pretty
an
good
amazing
office.
Yeah. But you know what also happens is I was very lucky because he was not great with children, but he loved informing me and teaching me, and he was an expert in Raffaello, and I remember him showing me things. So it was his way of communicating with me, because he wasn't the kind of grandfather who would play necessarily. So it was really interesting, and it's so weird, I'd not even thought about this until this
Well,
moment.
it's such a remarkable, it's a remarkable education, and it speaks to, who you are today and the work that you put out there for all of us. So it's a win-win. But anyway, it's interesting that we're all, where are we all? We're at home. We're not on airplanes.
Here we are.
We're not in hotels. We're at home. And so I wanted to just ask you, how do you imagine that, priorities will shift, and obviously everything sort of shifts a little bit when it comes to decorating and design. How do you, crystal ball it for me, Alessandra? How do you think that, for your clients and for others, how will things shift and change when it comes to design and decoration for residential design?
Well, the one thing I think that has happened is, I mean, there's so many things that have come of this, and I really believe that there are, if we can look for them, there are so many silver linings and blessings. And, once you get beyond the initial shock of this, it took me a little bit, because as you can imagine, the hyperactive child that I am, I grew up to be the crazy designer who was flying 160,000 miles a year. I never spent a week without being in one or two other cities. Most of my work is everywhere else but here, practically. So it was a shock, because it was like, stopping and having to really stop and sort of look around. And I have lived, this is my example, and I think it will form my opinion. I have found myself really living in my home, like really following the light. Chicago had snow last week, which is just ridiculous. But what I've done is, in the morning, I go and and I have I literally pulled out a folding table and set it up in a chair at an east window, because that way I have beautiful morning light. And then I do the same in the afternoon on the western side of the house. It's an old townhouse. And I found that I am living in my home so much more. And once I was relaxed enough to allow that to be the experience, I enjoy it. And I think that so many more people are going to take stock of who they are and what they've been doing. And, there's the bigger picture story, which is, what am I really doing with my life? Kind of, I'm sure I'm not alone. And there's a lot of us sort of thinking, wow. There's the second portion of it, which is the freedom that this weird little phone has made so we can work at a distance. So now what's an office? And then the third part is how this informs design. I think, I've always loved comfort. I've always felt that no matter how beautiful something is, if it doesn't work and it's not comfortable, it doesn't matter to me. It just doesn't work. It's not right. And so I've been focused on the comfort. And when this happened, we were actually in the middle of repainting the house we've lived in for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was very interesting. I stopped them, and then I've now realized that there are things that I love about it, and then there are other things that I would absolutely change and embrace the new and dive in and allow the new world to come in. I don't know, what was it like for someone to live in a house? We have clients who are very modern and have very sparse environments. And I was FaceTiming with one of them, and she has stuff everywhere, which made me feel really good, because it made me realize we all live the same way. I didn't have a big desk in my house, so I'm in stacks, and I've been drawing and paper everywhere, and she was living the same way. So is that going to be an interior that will suit if you spend more time at home? I don't know. I think that things will change, and I think they will change possibly for the better. Hopefully people will spend more time at home and be happy, because in the end, if you're not happy where you are, why are you doing it?
I agree. It's funny. I'm always on the road. I've always got my suitcase packed. I'm like every week. And, now it's been, I don't know, is it 5-6 weeks? And I have to say, I have never loved my home more. I've never been, more grateful, but it is hard to be like, go, 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 stop.
Boom. It's like a train. Boom.
Yeah, it's like
It's shock. It was literally like shock. I was initially shocked, then I was really lost because this isn't how I've been living for 30 years. And normally we're not even here at that time. We came home so we could both put our businesses in order. And then
yeah,
we were going to go back and meet my mother in Harbor Island, and they shut down the airport. So
yeah.
my mother, God bless her, at the age of 84, is sitting in Harbor Island in shelter and locked
Good.
in.
I hope
And
she's
loving,
painting. I hope she's making
I didn't
her
know,
beautiful artwork.
she doesn't paint anymore.
Oh,
She's changed. I don't think it's part of her mindset anymore, which is sort of sad, but she is thankfully slightly oblivious to the craziness of the world, which is good, which is what
okay.
one should get to that point at some
Yeah,
point.
you have to sort of learn to eventually, just sort of live in your world. But I also want to ask you, Alessandra, because to me, you're a true creative. You love color, and like you're always, who you are, your Instagram, you've got just a zest for life. And how have you been staying creative? What has
Oh
been
my God.
like, how are you
More than
spending your
ever, more
time?
than ever.
What
There
are
are
you
lots of
doing?
things. Well, one thing I'm doing is I've been drawing a lot. We had started some projects, and blessedly, God, I can't even imagine. I'm going to kiss my clients' feet when I see them. They've stayed the course. And so we have been working on a couple of really great new projects and designing. So for the first time in many years, I am almost obsessively working on these incredible things, and I'm able to delve into more, to really spend more time. Very often we find ourselves going and going, and the contractor's ready, and everyone wants to get the permits in, and you're doing all this stuff. And this time we all had to stop. So the architect has been working wonderfully with us, and we really have daily meetings. We have lots of meetings every day. I've never had so many meetings in my life.
I agree.
Thankfully, they're not all video. But literally, I'm on the phone, and we have meetings every day, and the teams come together, and I've been drawing like crazy, which I love, which I think is so important for us to get back to. I've also been reading, which I do anyway, like crazy. But I started a little project with my employees because I felt that at the end of this time, whatever this time may be, I felt that I'd noticed one thing in my office, that the senior people had a sort of inside language and references that the more junior and maybe, the middle range age had not had. And because of the amount of work that we do normally, having last year installed 24 projects, we had a crazy year. We never have time to just sit and think. And I've always fantasized about it. So what I did is we call it the co-education project. And it's a pun on lots of things, mainly co-education, where I assign a subject to each of them each week, and they have to research, and they have two tools they can use, which is their phone, and they can use Pinterest, and they can load a private Pinterest page, and then they use that to describe visually what they've studied. And we are going to do everything from iconic designers. We're doing films that have influenced our interiors, or my interiors.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like the most wonderful Alessandra Branca school that I want to be a part of.
I don't want it to be didactic. The whole point was, that's the co-part. I want them, I'm as excited to see where they came from and what they took from it as I am to be involved. And it's been wonderful, and it's so incredible. And we never have this time again.
Well,
I think this is what we need to do.
I have to say, it's very interesting. There's everything scary and frightening that's out there, but I am a very optimistic woman, but it's also a time of you're forced to be creative, because we're stuck here in our homes, and there's so many. If you think about it, you have a little bit more time to think and force yourself to come up with creative solutions, ideas, things that maybe you
Folding
wanted to
tables.
do, but so
Literally.
anyway.
literally, you know, those dinner, I don't know what Americans call them, that we don't have them in Italy. They're the folding tables that people eat. And
Yes.
that has become my desk, which after all that I have, that desk is what, and I move it around like it. So it's really interesting. Yes, we're all coming up with new solutions. I think there's also a lot of people that might sit back and say, why was I so obsessed with so many things? What really matters? What is it? Setting, you know, I did after a while say I'm going to support some of our florists and order one little bunch of flowers that I divide into little bud vases, and I set the table and we eat in the evening. I've used this occasion to do intermittent fasting. So I only eat one meal a day, which is dinner, which I love, and I'm totally happy with it. And, you know, we have been enjoying the rhythms, the rituals, the path, the, you have to let it go, because in the end, we're all in this together. It's the first time in history that the world is in one place, one experience at the same time.
Yeah.
And there has to be good that will come from this. And I do think the home will be far more important when everyone's spent their time. You know, we so often are lucky enough to do homes that people spend very little time in. So they're there. I have clients who were in temporary houses because their houses were being done, and they were about to move in. We had installations that were going to take place in March. So there's a lot it's going to be like Christmas by the time this
I'm
is
sure
done.
when they move in,
Hopefully
they will like,
won't be.
they'll kiss the ground when they move in.
Yep.
So I want to talk a little bit about your newest venture, Casa Branca, which tell us about, what's involved. When is this launching? I don't know if the plans have shifted.
You know, the slippery slide. You know, we started about many years ago. I've always done custom fabrics for clients. It's been part of who I am. Being Italian, you know, we have things made. It's part of, you know, we don't have the decorating trade as you have it in America or in England or France. We have, if you want something, you go and have your upholsterer make it. There's very little decorating the way it is in America. I mean, we had greats like Mongiardino, and there are many still, but not, it isn't the norm. It is, and so I always grew up going to the upholsterers with my grandmother, or going to buy the fabrics and doing those things. So I felt that I was very comfortable with many of the people who made my fabrics, and we decided that we wanted to start this brand. And my son is running it out of LA, and we have been building, so there are lots of layers to it. There's fabrics, wallpapers. Then I started a project with a group of genocide survivors in Rwanda, and we did embroidery on the fabrics. So we did a series of pillows and items for the house. We did table linens, bed linens, cocktail napkins and whatever, and they're all embroidered by these amazing souls who I can't even tell you. I couldn't wait to go back. I'm waiting, and I will make that trip. And then we did some dishes and hand-painted glassware. So they were the things that I felt that were the beginning of what would be a sort of, as some would call a lifestyle collection. But the truth is, it's really this very different lifestyle. It's me, but it's another side of me. And so it's been very interesting. And it's been a dream to work with my son and be able to develop, you know, we're working in Italy, we're working in France, we're working in California, in New York. We're working with vendors who are all small businesses. So this time has been a complicated time for all of them, as you can imagine.
Of course.
All our workrooms are, I mean, everybody is, it's crazy.
We're on a pause.
We are on a pause. And so hopefully we are hoping that by midsummer we can start again. I mean, we've already been selling. People have been calling and asking for samples and things that they've seen in posts and whatever. Casa Branca has its own Instagram, and it will begin to actually show more things. And then I've snuck some peeks, but people don't like that. My new boss isn't too crazy about that, but I can't resist. So,
of course, when it's beautiful, you want to put it out there. I'm following you on the Instagram on Casa Branca, and love like seeing what's going to be coming from there. So it'll be something that we absolutely anticipate. just a few more questions. So you love to wanderlust. You're in the Bahamas, you're in Rome, you're in
Yeah, the bug.
Chicago. Now that you're sheltering in place, what is your fantasy shelter in place destination, or like the first place that you will imagine that you would go to
Oh my God.
once you
Pamela,
can?
as crazy, this is literally the only thing that I can't wait for is to be with my children. My two sons live in LA. My daughter lives in New York. And my husband said, I wish we have to fly to New York, pick her up and take her to California so we can all be together again. And by the way, try to pick up my mother as well.
Yeah.
Um, that in the end, that's the very first of anything to me. It's that, I'm so jealous of all the friends who were able to get their kids to come home and be in one place, albeit some of them are going crazy. But the truth is that to me is the first thing. That's very Italian of me, but family is number one. The second thing is it will be my country. I can't even imagine. I talk to people all the time. I don't even know what Rome will be like. This is worse than World War I and World War II put together. It's terrible. I spoke to a friend of ours who owns a very popular restaurant, and he's like our kitchen in Rome. And we spoke yesterday, and he said, I think most of the restaurants in the neighborhood will be gone. And
Yeah,
I mean, think about it.
the
It's just
heartbreak.
crazy.
It is.
The world as I've known it, unlike America, we have restaurants that last 40, 50, 60, 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's less common to have new restaurants in Italy. And I've gone to the same restaurant for 40 years. 40 years. I mean,
Yeah.
50, 60 years. I mean, it's been my whole life.
That's sort of the heart, your heart breaks. And those places, I think, just they have so much meaning and character and the history that's there and the everything. So that's the part that's really tough.
Rome is Rome. The beauty of Rome is you walk the same stones that have been walked on for 2,000 years. They have survived so much more. And in that sense, you really feel the feeling of Italy. But in terms of shelter in place, I think, my ideal is to be happy where I am, which is a big, wish in my mind. In other words, don't race around so much. Don't run from this to that. Stop, look, listen, enjoy, absorb, and then possibly, venture. But I think that's going to be isn't this crazy? From 166,000 miles last year, I'm going to be like,
well, that might be the lesson. I was going to, my last question was going to say, share something uplifting or a message, but there it is. You just did. And that is something that I think we're all having to learn, right? There's a lot of lessons here. And one of them, right, as women who are just like, go, go, go. And I think for everyone, I think the world has become a very fast-paced, what's happening next, what's around the corner. And we've all had to just, take this pause and it's reflect. And in some cases we can do things. In other cases we can't. We're watching people we love in places that we love struggle, and it can be painful, but there's beauty in all of this too, and the message. So I don't know, it's a crazy yet interesting time.
What's interesting is initially, of course, I, like everybody else in the world, was frustrated with the timing and the length of time. And there are moments, more than there should be probably, where I kind of am okay with it lasting a little longer because I finally am getting it. And it's almost like I've been slapped in the face and told to settle down. And I have it. I'm reading more. I do think for everyone, you have to look at the good side. Otherwise we don't survive life. And that's how they got through World War I, World War II. When I did that first study with my employees, with my team, I gave them World War people, designers who were designers between World War I and World War II, and a couple just after. And it was interesting. They had to see how John Fowler handled it. How did Nancy Lancaster? The world has had terrible things forever. everyone has survived and we will thrive and be better for it. I really believe that. I really do.
Yeah, we will be changed. It is interesting because I also thought to myself, I think when we get back and on planes and all that, which we will, that will happen, will come one day. Our D-Day will be when they have a vaccine. That will be D-Day, right? There will be dancing in the streets, and when everybody can access a vaccine, that will be our D-Day. But I think I will mourn a little bit. I know this for like the days that the slower days that it's Saturday, I'm in my house, I'm just reading a book and enjoying, a glass of wine. So
I keep thinking, we are almost like in the 19th century. Have you ever thought of that?
yes,
This must be what it was like.
yes,
I love that it's quiet at night because I live in a city and I can sleep. But it's the first time we can think of what it was actually like to live in a time when there wasn't, except for this thing and Zoom and FaceTime and house party and all that.
yeah.
But if you forget all that, we're living in this sort of quiet moment, and we have to just get strength from it. I think the stories will be amazing. It'll be interesting to see the creativity that explodes from it, because there's been all sorts of pent up stuff going on. And the good energy, all the good energy, there will be tons, and the world will be together in one place for once.
There you go. That's the positive message. And Alessandra, it's been so wonderful to talk with you. Thank you so much for being part of our master class, and massive love.
Thank you, baby. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ciao, Bella. Ciao.
Hey design friends, Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design here. And today I want you to celebrate with me. It was exactly 1 year ago today that abracadabra and presto, DesignTV by SANDOW was born. Can you believe it? After the crisis hit, we not only did a pivot, but we persevered, creating a new digital community celebrating the best luminaries, makers, and movers and shakers in design. So today we celebrate. Now, I get to eat cake, and you get to watch just a few of my many favorites. So how about a triple header of 3 mini documentaries? Enjoy.
I use a lot of my memory as a source of inspiration. After high school here in Paris, I think I took 1 year where I went to the movies 3 times a day. And I saw so many of them. German movie, Italian neorealism, the American movies. And I really fed myself with those images. And I kind of trained my eye to see like a camera. Yeah. I know what's photogenic.
You have a lot of languages. You speak a lot of languages. You studied architecture.
Yeah.
You did graphic design and product design, furniture design.
Yeah.
You're multi everywhere you turn.
I like to define myself as polyglot and polychrome. And it's a way of saying that I mix everything together. My references are multiple. What I've lived through, what I've seen, what I've digested. And I've had to adapt all my life. Okay, when you move the whole time, what you do is, what you're good at is understanding the codes of place, and you just grab them and you make them yours. I've learned to become a chameleon. I was born in Iran. My family moved to the United States, to Cambridge, Massachusetts, when I was 1.5 years. They were the happiest years of my life, just because my family was all together. The memories I had of that period are very colorful. I remember waking up watching color television, which was like a huge thing. And I remember going to school with my lunchbox. And I've kept within me this love of colors.
It was a breath of fresh air when we first showed India. It was the first time we did color Pucci. Everyone's looking for what's new and next, and India certainly has her pulse on that.
Ralph came to me, I think in 2005, and he really loved the freshness of it, the colors, but he kept on saying, I'm not so sure America's ready for this. I'm not so sure America's ready for all these colors. These colors come from America.
They come from my lunchbox, I just want you to know.
Exactly.
You know, I think India is really in her own little unique world. I remember when we created the walls in this space, someone came in and said, oh, that's the ugliest green I have ever seen. And I said, just wait, it's going to be fabulous. India is a magician. It's that simple. She just creates magic.
There is definitely an emotional quality to all the work. Where is that coming from within you?
Yeah, I think happiness is part of my work. You know, when I come in a colorful room, I feel the sun, I feel the light, I feel the happiness, I feel the joy. Color has become a mean of expression to me.
Yes.
But I want to show you, for instance,
Yeah.
you know, I have some bright colors, but this is just so typical. You know, you can mix these together.
Yeah, velvet is really interesting because it takes the light uniquely. India forced us to look further.
What this was about is like creating a box of crayons to me. In the beginning of my career, I really found a way of defining my projects through color.
Right.
And I just realized that because I had the ability to dare, it felt just so natural for me. I remember a project I did in Mexico, in Condesa, with Grupo Habitat and Jonathan Moore. Originally it was planned with all these shutters with tons of colors. And then they told me, no, we're scared of color, do it all white. So we made it all white. And I came and it was a bit boring. So then I took this turquoise and I said, paint all the ground floor this color. And the next day we came back and it suddenly grounded the whole project in a very different way.
Right.
There was a red of townhouse. Then I started mixing a lot of colors and a lot of textures together. And I had an ability to do that. It was just like a challenging myself of saying, you know what, I can mix flowers and geometric patterns and colors, up to 16 different patterns together and get away with it. And that's what I used in Le Germain, and I had fun with it, just proving myself I could do that.
Wow.
And then suddenly Sketch came up. Sketch has 3 or 4 restaurants, and this was just one big room they had. And also it was a room that was dedicated to this artist, David Shrigley.
Right, so you already had his art.
So I go down, I see the room, and I say, yeah, I think it should be pink. And Mourad Mazouz, the owner, said, no, I don't like pink, but you do whatever you want. It's a very immersive room. And of course, for that project, I designed this little Charlotte chair because it looks like a plumpy little cake, which has become a signature piece,
By the way, there's no project that could be yours forever as La Durée.
Oh, right.
I mean, come on, it is so you.
It's true that I've done 3 La Durées. They had in the DNA a relation to French classic, to Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
And they came to me saying, what is La Durée today? And I said, well, you know, something very simple. It's Marie Antoinette traveling. What is Marie Antoinette when she goes to Hollywood? What is it like when she goes to Geneva? What would she like if she goes to Japan? So it's a garden of sweetness. Here we're on my street, on the street Las Casas. So it all started here. This was my studio.
That's amazing.
So these are the heroes of my childhood.
Here's the nod.
Yeah. Then I found the studio upstairs and I decided to transform this into a showroom. Here we're in the studio, which is like the head of all the creative part. It would be nice if we painted it a bright color, maybe a yellow. The design of furniture and objects, the interior design, the scenography, the architecture. It all happens here.
Look at the colors.
I did a chess
Oh my
game
goodness.
with my bishop, and we're doing the salt and pepper like this. I usually design a piece of furniture for every single project I do. And this is the second space I opened, which is all about small objects.
Come on in.
This is what sort of makes me happy. Little objects, high energy.
Hey, by the way, it smells delicious in here.
Thank you.
And everything you want to touch and take home, basically.
In fact, I never wanted to become an architect. Really, all of this is a big accident. I wanted to become a filmmaker.
Right.
Once I finished my architecture school in Paris, I went to New York for a year and I took these courses at Parsons, at Cooper Union, and actually it gave me a very different intake. You know how you think of architecture? You start with a site and you zoom in, you know? And suddenly it was the other way around, as you started with a small element and you're zooming out, you know, so it was a different perspective.
So you liked seeing that, right?
So I came back to Paris and it was full of energy. We're Place de la Bastille, so this is where the whole French Revolution started, you know?
Oh my goodness.
This is one of the big cafes I designed for the Thierry and Gilbert Coste. It's a revisited brasserie. We wanted this to be strong enough to hold the void of the city.
This is like the kind of project that will last for the next 20 years.
That's what we do. I
Right.
capture the sign of the time. I like giving people a way to feel they're somewhere special. But at the same time, I don't want it to be overwhelming.
It seems to me that your toolbox is full of all these things that you can use.
I love going back and forth to Iran. You know, there's a lot of diversity in terms of architecture, in terms of history. They've liberated themselves from the rules.
Right.
And there's something soft and beautiful and rough and hard at the same time. And those two together actually create something that's quite fascinating.
Are we talking about you? In some way, we're talking about you. in some
Yeah,
way.
maybe, yeah.
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 Very often there is a critique about consumerism, but we can't stop inventing things. We have to invent things. We can't decide that all the objects are good and we don't need another chair or another spoon or another car. That's not true. We need them because we need to think, we need to create, we need to do new things. We accomplish ourselves, all humans, in creation, in invention. So design for me is superhuman. This one is called the pasta pot.
Pasta pot.
Okay, so it's a tool. Right? So okay, you are cooking the risotto, and after you have this spoon. Okay,
Right,
you don't know what to
with
do,
it?
so you put it here. But it's become very messy. So the idea was to put it inside the handle. Okay. When we design an object, we design also the gesture. So yeah, we talk a little bit about functionality. Of course, this is a casserole and how I hold it, how I use it. But there is a beauty in how we use it and the pleasure and where I put my hand, what is the contact with the material. at the Centre Pompidou. I had this show on my career as a designer.
A one-man show.
Yeah, the one-man show. I wanted to explain to the public what is design. You understand, from my father, I love technology, I love techniques, I love how things are made. And you can't draw anything if you don't know how they are made. It's a part of the process. My mother is a nurse and my father is a craftsman. When I was young, my parents were not very rich, so all the furniture was done by him and my mother. And I will help him. I remember just holding a piece of steel like this and he's welding. You know, when you weld, you have sparkles, you have a lot of, the light is very powerful, so you can't look at it. And me, I'm closing my eyes like this and it's burning, it's tickling, you know, your hand. But I was proud, and I was learning. I didn't know. But all these years, I was just learning processes.
I think of Patrick Jouin as a kind of age of reason, 18th century Wunderkammer kind of designer, where it's a natural collision and orchestration of nature, science, and art.
Me, I'm coming from a very old age. I'm just using my pencil and a piece of paper. Okay, I don't know how to do the 3D things. So we decide, let's use this incredible new technology of rapid prototyping. This object is made in a machine, which is full of dust of plastic. And there is not one screw, no one has assembled these pieces. They are all made in one shot. That's why I call it one shot.
Wow.
In one time in the machine.
That's amazing.
Technology, it's like a new instrument. It's like Alice in Wonderland. You open a little door and behind you have an incredible space of freedom. And you are with your machete and you can go, you can do whatever you want. It's freedom is incredible. And in design, every time you have a new technology, you have a new aesthetic. So I call this lamp Bloom. And I wanted to even go even deeper in the complexity, but at the same time, there is always a function behind. Complexity or simplicity, it's the same for the machine. But you see the beauty also of just the movement. Okay, something like this. And you can see all the pieces all assembled inside the machine.
When he uses technology, he uses it in such a way that it's wondrous. He created, they're really artifacts, momentous occasions where this technology realized for the first time ever an object in a new way.
I think design is really in between these three things important for me. Art, craftsman, materials, technology, my father, and empathy, my mother. You always have to put yourself at the place of the people who will use the project, always. I thought I will only design furniture when I came out of a Stark studio. So, okay, that's what I like to do and I enjoy it. I will do that all my life. I will design chairs. Okay, no problem. And my first commission is the chef, Alain Ducasse. It's a big French chef. We work very well together and he asked me to design his restaurant. And I'm very happy because I didn't know I wanted this. You know, it was something, it was hidden inside me. And you have someone who's saying, would you like to design a restaurant? Oh, yes, yes. The Plaza Athénée bar, it has really been my first big project. In Paris, we are very lucky. You have the Eiffel Tower. But it's true for us French, you go once, but you look at it every day. It's so important. It represents a modernity which will not have failed, an happy modernity, an happy progress. And that's what we have injected in the Eiffel Tower. The restaurant is called Le Jules Verne. The Eiffel Tower is 10,000 tons. and we are not allowed to put 1 kilo. So when we have demolished the restaurant, we have weighed everything, okay? And everything we have put, were too heavy. So we have worked with carbon fiber to make it light. Since the beginning, the studio is organized on these 3 bases: the furniture, the architecture, and the industrial design. And one day, someone is asking me to design a house, a huge house in Malaysia. And it was our first architectural project. And while we were doing this with Sanjit, it becomes very evident that we wanted to do more architecture. So I asked him to become my associate. And now we are like a rock band or a jazz band. We are playing together, we are making music together. We designed this project on the Place Vendôme in Paris with Van Cleef and Arpels. Their spirit, the way they design things, is very close to what I do. The relation with organic shapes, with sensuality, with nature, with beauty, it's already in our work. Yes, we have many projects. I have designed in Paris the bicycle system. I have designed also the toilet system and the advertising system. Now we are working on the bus stop and also this taxi sign. I like this idea of this object which is just going all around like this and like a dance. I love New York. It's a city, it's incredible. In New York, we designed Guild at the New York Palace Hotel and Mix, Alain Ducasse restaurant. A project is taking us to another city in the US, Las Vegas. Here, we are on top of a tower, 43rd floor, and we have emptiness again. And I like this. What can I put in this emptiness? And we are surrounded by the desert, so I put a cloud, water. And we have made a huge chandelier with 14,000 bubbles made in Murano in Italy with blown glass. They are all different. It's called ether.
Ether? And the shape's not perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
This idea of imperfection, it's catching the light. When we design, we want to design everything, from the chair, to the spoon, to the light. So when you come in, you never saw it before. It's a new thing, it's a new impression, and you will go out and you will never see it. You have to come back. Because we are not designing architecture, we are not designing objects, we are designing a moment. We are inventing a memory, a future memory. We are inventing a mood. And I like also creating a space where you don't know exactly where you are, especially a bar. Because in a bar, maybe you want to be someone else. And I think the space can help you to be the one you would like to be for maybe a few minutes.
What do you imagine yourself to be in this bar?
Me, just a designer.
Poi questo fai solo metà, quelli?
O basta, o faccio troppa. Ancora vuoi fare?
No, no, ancora un pochino. Il coltello, veramente non taglio. You know, design for me is like when you want to make an omelette. I want to make a good omelette for you. But if you don't like porcini, I can make a good omelette with zucchini. I don't try to convince you that porcini is very good. You don't like, you don't like. I make another omelette.
Oh my goodness. Paola.
This is my roof.
And your little fish welcoming us.
The fish is the welcome Chinese fish.
I mean, this is you. Like you walk into a designer's home and this represents how they think about the world and of design, right?
I never really designed my apartment. I designed the architecture and then somehow is an accumulation of things, one by one, all this piece.
Interesting.
All my exercises build on curiosity. Curiosity and travel. Every day you capture something. Noise, sound, food, smell, color. Everything goes in a big basket without logic. Deciding what to do is very fast exercise. I have this idea coming up in the basket and then I just take it out.
Can you tell me what you were like as a young child? Were you creative?
Terrible child.
In what way?
Because I was really systematically doing the opposite of what I was asked to do. I never liked the school since day one. So I heard that there were people around the world doing interesting project. UFO in Florence were doing like a theater in the street. Archigram, Archizoom. They are all architects, but they managed to do something else. Mendini one morning called me and asked me if I want to come to Milano, because he was having a magazine, very famous magazine called Casabella. So I came to Milano to work, and then I'm still here, more or less. For us, young designer was the possibility to be different from the very important Italian design. I was very happy because I was working in something that was a real job, but there was always a little component of fun. We were putting a lot of attention on the skin done into the real structure of the design, giving a lot of attention to the surface. I love this material, cement tile.
Yeah, I love it.
And I decided to make some pattern, a little bit graphic, because I want to give a contemporary image with the traditional technique.
Right. Because you like to do things that are a little off, right?
Yes. I like to do installation very much, because it's concentration of energy, and after 4 days, disappear. Wow. So now we go to Palazzo.
Yeah.
And we are going to see beautiful textile.
She's so modest.
Yeah.
So the big innovation of Paola and what we loved her for is her color palette.
Yes.
When you look at them, you want to live with them and to play with combination, which are fabulous.
Yeah.
This is to die for.
Fantastic. I would make a coat out of this.
Look. Ah, now you can see.
Gorgeous.
I can work everywhere and I can have roots everywhere. Many people ask where is home. There are 1,000 places that I like and I feel at home. When I land in Hong Kong, I feel already at home. And I love Southeast Asia very much. Everybody was working by hand. I discovered weaving, all the world of ceramic. When I was coming back, I was trying to convince the industry to be more curious about craft. Use that capacity to produce something that looks very modern. Hotels or public spaces is a little bit like a theater for the actors who are going to take advantage of that space. I always had this attraction to the color of the water, the color of the sky, the liquid color. Because always I like with water, and I like fish. I'm a fish.
So here is a project of placemat for a restaurant, Korean restaurant we are designing in Paris.
This is the sample of the material, of the floor, on the wall and the ceiling.
Dipped in the color.
Look at this.
Wow.
We have worked about very spectacular material.
It's beautiful.
It's a very traditional material,
right?
But the way we use it, with
quirky.
Paola,
it has
very,
personality.
You know, it's very strange, you know.
Yeah.
These things, sometimes when they look, they say, "Oh, you want bad?" No, I don't want bad. I want not perfect. I promote imperfection. Like in the Dodo shop, for example, the brown glue is the glue that in the bathroom they use to glue their tiles. This is the material I use on the wall.
So how many Dodo shops have you designed?
Oh, many. The point of view of the client, technical issue, cost, are not barriers. I like to consider them as an element of the design. I love caviar, but in the same way I like anchovies. E qua dobbiamo, adesso ti devo fare gli occhi. You need to have a counterpart who like to play this game.
Baxter makes everything here.
They really make the sofa from A to Z. So the cow arrives, the sofa go to the truck. They have their knowledge. And I can use it, again, in a special way. Design is a job. I always try to explain that to the young designer in Asia because they always say, I'm the artist. I say, no, you're not the artist, you are the designer, which is something else.
But you have a very open idea about what is beautiful or how to use things that are everyday that makes them extraordinary or very, very special.
Yeah, but this is my attitude of curiosity to put together things. I mean, it's totally without rules. The only rules is the curiosity and then at the end to have a good omelette.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to DesignTV by SANDOW. I'm Avi Rajagopal, Editor-in-Chief of Metropolis. It's been a fantastic year sharing content with you here on DesignTV by SANDOW. What an amazing way for us to connect with people from all over the country and for you to connect with some of the best minds in the business. Those of you who have been watching our videos on Facebook or on our web pages, welcome and thank you so much for supporting the content that we put out. For those of you who joined us live during our many recordings over the past year as part of our webinars, as part of our think tank series, or as part of our Perspective Sustainability Symposia, we couldn't have produced all of this amazing content without you. Without the participation of the audiences, we couldn't have had the fantastic discussions we've had. We couldn't have dived as deep as we did. And so thank you for that. Today, I've picked one of my favorite videos that Metropolis has produced over the past year in Design TV by SANDOW. It's titled Fighting Climate Change with Interior Design. And it is amazing because it really shows how much power and influence interior designers have to do something about what is likely the biggest challenge of our life and the biggest challenge our world faces right now, which is the climate crisis. We, at the time when this video was recorded, were working on an amazing featured article for our November-December issue around this very topic. And we had discovered that interior designers, by some estimates, could influence up to 10% of global carbon emissions. That is huge power, and power that interior designers haven't always known to use before. Well, to tell us how to do that, we had some great panelists: Lisa Conway from Interface, Jennifer Chen from Element Architects, and Megan Lewis from the Carbon Leadership Forum. Three incredible leaders who've been at the forefront of trying to understand the connections between carbon emissions and interior renovations. So without further ado, I hope you like this segment as much as I do, and I hope it leaves you as inspired as it did me. Here is Fighting Climate Change with Interior Design. Hi everyone, and welcome to Design TV by SANDOW. Today we're going to be talking about some groundbreaking research and some amazing initiatives on how we can fight climate change with interior design. For any of you who have been following the conversations around carbon and carbon neutrality this year, we started there with some big pledges. Microsoft pledging to go carbon negative by the year 2040, Amazon signing on 3 major partners to go carbon neutral by 2030. So some amazing commitments this year. But within our industry, within architecture and design, a lot of the attention has focused on architecture, on structure and envelope, and the difference we can make there. Because as we look to bring down our carbon emissions, the focus has shifted to what we call embodied carbon. Embodied carbon, of course, being all the emissions, all that smoke and carbon dioxide we put in the air in the process of extracting materials, turning them into products, and assembling those products into buildings, right? So all the things that happen before the building actually opens to the public and the lights get turned on. And that carbon that we call embodied carbon, we've focused most of our attention on sort of what we've understood as the big offenders: steel, right? Those things in studies so far have accounted for the biggest percentage of embodied carbon, but that's because studies have focused on the structure and the envelope of buildings. Interior design, as interior designers know, is an entirely other ball game. Interiors turn over every few years, especially commercial interiors are renovated every few years. So the carbon footprint of interior design is a complex thing to understand. And yet new research shows that interior designers can do more than they think. And so to talk about that today, we have an amazing group of panelists. We have with us Jennifer Chen, who's an interior designer with Element Architects in Seattle, who's done a groundbreaking study on the embodied carbon of interior renovations, looking at Element's own office as an example. We have with us Lisa Conway, who is the VP of Sustainability Americas at Interface, which launched its first carbon negative products as part of the Embodied Beauty Collection. Carbon negative, meaning that it's not just that these products don't have a carbon footprint, but that they actually give back to the environment, they offset or sequester carbon. So that's absolutely fantastic. Also with us today is Megan Lewis, who's a senior researcher at the Carbon Leadership Forum, who has studied the carbon footprint of a tenant improvement project at WeWork. Tenant improvement, of course, is one of the major fields of work for commercial interior designers in particular. So we're excited to hear what she has to say as well. Thank you all so much for joining me today. This is fantastic.
Sure, thank you.
Jen, you studied the renovations that your office has gone through since the building that it's a part of was built in 1960. So we're talking about a 60-year period and multiple renovations in that period. Tell us a little bit about what you found in terms of embodied carbon.
Yeah, so the Norton building that our office exists in has been in existence for 60 years, but our office actually moved in 84, so we've been there about 36 years. Yeah, and like Avi was saying, you know, as an interior designer, I started really wondering what the impact it would be for the TI cyclical renovations. Because a lot of times when we look at the finishes or the interior embodied carbon impact of a point in time or when the building is first built, it's only a fraction, sometimes, 17%, something less than 20%. So it's not significant compared to structure and envelope. But when we used our own office as case studies, even only in the 36 years we've been in the building, we went through a cycle of renovation about every 9 years. And what we found was we studied the cumulative embodied carbon of all the renovations only through 36 years, and the overall embodied carbon impact is actually almost 3/4 of what structure would have been. And, because as Avi said, the building is 60 years old, and if we had been in that building for 60 years, and we can assume that maybe 9 years prior to our first move in, we had another renovation. So if we added all that up together, the cumulative embodied carbon of interiors or the cyclical interior renovations actually surpasses both structure and envelope. So the impact is quite big, and our office, at least the current iteration, actually has a very minimal palette, and it's an open office with open ceilings, not a lot of walls. So you can see if we start to add in all the little pieces that go in interior design or interior finishes, it's actually quite a big of impact, even just in a short span of a few cyclical renovations.
This is a huge deal. I can't believe that, for such a long time, we've entirely missed the idea that interiors are taken out and put back in every few years, and therefore that the embodied carbon would add up. So what looks like 17% when a building is new, over time as tenants come in and leave and come in and leave, that's as much as structure and envelope, which is what you found. It's absolutely astounding. But it also is a message of hope, right? It means that there's a lot that we can do as the interior design industry to contribute to that larger fight against climate change. So thank you so much, Jen, for the work that you've done. Megan, I want to get into a little bit of detail with you. You worked on the single tenant improvement project, basically when we moved into a space. That was a project that was done with IA Interior Architects and Carbon Leadership Forum, where you now work, actually conducted the study for you. What interior elements had the biggest embodied carbon footprints? Were there any surprises there? So as you analyzed all the elements within that single tenant improvement, what did you find?
Yeah, so unlike the office that Jen just described, WeWorks aren't all open plans. So there's a balance of different types of spaces, and especially with some really small office spaces with just a couple of people. One of the things that was, the largest element to consider in that study was the walls. So the glass and storefront in particular, the aluminum glass, and then following that, the interior walls. So the wallboard, the insulation, the studs. And so one of the things that that sort of shows you, especially with the interior walls, is that there's a lot that can happen before you need to sacrifice, because there are obviously a lot of beautiful low carbon products out there, but before aesthetics are really even competing, where there's a lot of data available and lower carbon solutions that are out there. And because this hasn't been as much of a part of the conversation so far, I think there's been some missed opportunities to take advantage of those, because it's one of those both and, not either or situations. And then there was also a little bit, and this is looking ahead a little to what research still needs to happen around HVAC and lighting. Those were following walls for us. And so those are things where there aren't necessarily as obvious of solutions, but that's why we need to start thinking about it now.
Right, absolutely. I think that's really interesting, and you made an important point there. So, while we have to care about the embodied carbon because it adds up over time, but any interior designer is responsible for the renovation that they're working on now. So you kind of have to think about your contribution to that cumulative carbon footprint. And within that contribution, you've pointed out something really important that, before you start to talk about, we don't have options for this, options for that, the big contender is interior partitions and walls. And so, making the right layout decisions itself can have a huge impact. So thank you for pointing that out. As you said, MEP, so lighting and mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, there's still work to be done on that. We don't know fully the impact of those things. And of course, following that, if I'm not mistaken, casework, millwork, furniture, and flooring definitely are close followers onto that as part of your study. So that's really interesting, is I think it gives us a hierarchy in terms of what we need to focus on in terms of lowering carbon footprint. Because we know that the little bit that we do now can make a huge impact over the life cycle of a building. And that's the power interior designers have. Lisa, can you talk to me about how Interface is responding to this idea? I mean, you've been thinking about this for a while now. Tell us about how you got to carbon negative with your new products and what the implications are.
Yeah, so a lot of our history is obviously tied to our mission from 25 years ago, Mission Zero. So we've kind of been working to lower the carbon footprint of our products over those 25 years, and nobody cared. This was not, there was no metropolis, gathering on embodied carbon. Like, that was just not happening. So we definitely did have a head start. But I think one of the interesting things is when you have a goal that really sounds impossible, which was when we launched our new mission in 2016 to reverse global warming, how can we take that and apply it to products? That was something that we knew how to think about how to get to zero, but ultimately we want to be restorative. And I think that, both Megan and Jen, ultimately the reason that we're measuring how much the problem is to ultimately, the moonshot goal is to get to buildings as carbon sinks. How can we design buildings that are actually part of the solution? Because just releasing less over time is not going to get us there. We need to actually draw down all of the excess and waste carbon that we've put up into the atmosphere. So has been a really exciting challenge. Carpet, if you're not paying attention, can be one of the big offenders, especially when you don't have a lot of walls. So really thinking about what are the hot spots of your space. WeWork is kind of unique in that there are a lot of partitions. We've moved a lot to open office in other types of cases. So flooring is a bigger contributor if you're not paying attention. So this is an exciting week that we're actually recording this, because on Tuesday, we launched our first carbon negative carpet tile, which actually stores more carbon than has been released to make it. So that is just kind of pointing us towards what's possible, hopefully for a lot more products than just flooring, so that we can get to those, carbon negative spaces, carbon negative buildings someday. That's been really an exciting kind of beacon, I think, in this conversation, because usually it's like hemp or, something supernatural. It's not the materials that we're typically used to all the time. But now you can get a product that, that performs and looks the same as it always has, but has this kind of additional feature of really being restorative to the planet.
This is the thing that interior designers have going for them. Right. This is where we're lucky that we're in this industry, because, when architects found out that, structure and envelope concrete had such a big, carbon impact, it's taken years to find solutions for low carbon concrete. The nice thing about interiors is that, as Megan pointed out, and as Lisa is saying, we have manufacturers who have been on the forefront, sort of ahead of the curve on this, understanding that, the day is going to come when they're going to have to lower their carbon footprint, and have kind of prepared for that. So we're lucky. We do have options for low carbon products available, not in all categories, but certainly in some high impact categories, and flooring being one of them. So thank you so much, Lisa, for taking us through that, because I think that's really important. To all of you, I'd love to hear, so now we know that interiors are part of the problem and therefore part of the solution, right? We know that we have to do something about this. We didn't have the data until now, but at least now we can start to say, studies and numbers are pointing us to the fact that interiors have a much bigger impact than we've ever guessed before. Now that we're at this juncture, what is sort of the long-term process we need to take? Like, how do interior designers, how does the interior design industry as a whole, designers, manufacturers, you know, our contractors, clients, all of us together, work towards bringing down embodied carbon emissions?
I think that no matter where you sit in this conversation, whether you're a manufacturer or a designer or a building owner, I think it's about thinking about the emissions beyond just what you emit and into the supply chain. You know, where for someone like Jen, LMN's operational energy impact is not big. You know, their biggest lever is the supply chain of all the stuff they specify. When Megan was at WeWork, it wasn't WeWork's operations, it was the supply chain. We need to do both. But I think that the reason that we're having this conversation is because we all know how to think about operational carbon. You know, at home, it's about saving money on our energy bill, et cetera. What we're trying to shine a light on is really thinking beyond that to parts of our carbon impact that we influence but may not control at Interface. That's not, we don't make our own yarn. But we're responsible for the impact of that yarn because that's what we make our products with. So really using the opportunity to not only focus on what we control, but also what we influence, and having those conversations and using our buying power and spec power, et cetera, to be able to have those conversations with for us, our top suppliers, you know, really for anyone in the conversation with your top suppliers to really move the needle.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, jumping in from an interior designer point of view, I mean, like Lisa said, the spec power, I think it's taking that next step and really thinking about what product are you putting into your, like you said, the current project, because, you know, there's the time that we're trying to race to for carbon neutrality, and comparing the products and knowing what's out there and continuing to kind of push for transparency is the level that I think we've been communicating to the manufacturers at. And then now is the time that we can now take the next step and really compare the information that we get from this disclosures from manufacturers and understanding what decisions you can make to lower your impact in your practice.
Yeah, and jumping in a sort of thinking even beyond just exactly what product you use, which is a super important part of actually following through on making design decisions around embodied carbon. But I tend to think of it as sort of reuse, reduce, replace, optimize as a sort of 4 steps for your embodied carbon. I think some of those steps are going to continue to become easier to do over time as better solutions. So reuse, for example, right now is an area that is still somewhat, you know, it's at the beginning of having a better reuse marketplace in the US, you know, whether that's refurbished furniture or actually just harvesting building materials at the end of a building life so that they have a longer life. And then for reducing products, if it's a really high impact product, then use less of it. And then the sort of replace and optimize are more thinking about looking at different kinds of products that you could be using. And then optimize is really okay, I'm picking a carpet. There's a carbon negative carpet, and then there's one that has a high impact. That's hopefully a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right. I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of the end of life of projects as well. From all of your point of view, you know, obviously that's the key thing for interior designers, right? So we're designing this project. We know that, you know, in 10 years or so, it's going to be renovated in some way. And, you know, whether it should be or not, we can have that conversation. But, you know, continuing the status quo now, we know that, you know, 10 years renovation is likely going to happen. How do we plan for that 10-year mark as sort of responsible stewards now? So if you're specifying and making decisions for a project now, what are some of the things we should keep in mind, you know, for looking at sort of that end of life or demolition, disassembly, you know, all of that stuff?
Yeah, I really want to reiterate the importance of the point that Megan made in terms of reuse and that end of life. And think of the circular economy concept, and I tend to think of carbon as something that you invest and not something that you want to spend. So if you can recapture a material and extend its useful life, you're kind of putting that carbon back into process, and you're not just wasting that. And we talked about this a little bit in that if a building owner can go into a building and see what is in the building as something that has value after its current renovation cycle, then you can put that back into the next renovation and save not only in the economy sense, but also in terms of lowering the embodied carbon, because you're not putting something into the landfill and having to buy something new. And if we can design for deconstruction as much as we think about how something go together, then that would also help that process, because then you can easily take something apart and keep its value without damaging the material. So that's something that would be interesting to put into practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are some solutions that are out there that are they're not quite as exciting because they're basically involve paperwork and contracts, fun things like that. But for example, there are carpet take-back programs. There are furniture reuse programs where at the end of a project's life, they can be donated or bought by other companies. But that involves really educating the project team, including the owner. And so having seen this from both the architect's point of view as well as the owner's point of view, that's a communication point that gets dropped sometimes because, I mean, it's difficult. It's 10 years out. So there's a high likelihood that everyone on that team could be different. And so making sure that it's written into documents in a way that people can find it later is tricky, but we need to get better at it.
Yeah, and I would say like one of the most frustrating things for us as a manufacturer is to see our product only be down for 5 years because it's made to last so much longer than that. You know, some of our education and healthcare customers will keep it down, 20 plus years, but a lot of our corporate customers, which is the bulk of our work, that stuff cycles out so fast. So anytime there's an opportunity, even if you're not keeping it in the space, donating it for reuse in the local community, I think is something that everybody on the project can feel good about. Or it can, in our case, certainly come back to us. We don't get enough material back by and large from most projects. Most projects do not send that back unless it's a lead ID&C project where that's really being measured for a specific purpose. We would love to get more of it back. And one of the things that can be really missing in the conversation, everybody has a take-back program. Right, a take-back program. One of the things to really do the checks and balances on take-back programs is what happens to it? Where is the post-consumer recycled content in your new products? Because there's a lot of lack of transparency around take-back programs that is just sorely missing. So that's kind of an extra layer. I know it's an extra thing to do, but if you learn it on one project, you can take that knowledge to the next one. But all of that, first keep it in place, second donate it in your community, third send it back to the manufacturer, but make sure that if you're sending it back that you know what's happening to it.
Right. I'm sure we're going to hear this, Lisa, and I'm sure you hear it every time you bring this up with corporate clients. I know Jen, you will relate to this as well, right? It's often like it uglies out before it wears out, right? So people want to change things because they want change. They want to change in their environment. They want, they have a different philosophy. They moved into a space that was occupied by somebody else, right? So there's a lot of reasons why interiors get ripped out. There's lots of cultural reasons. And I'm just wondering if we can reflect a little bit on the cultural shift that we need to foster as interior designers. What kind of aesthetics do we need to be open to? How can we change this culture of renovation without designing ourselves out of a job?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we sell most of what we sell is gray. So like if someone can't work with gray, I don't know, like like a lot of the stuff that's down is okay. And I think people just have like they have trouble getting past it. So, you know, Jen can probably weigh in, and probably Megan too, just on what can stay. And I think the before and afters of, you know, this is what it looked like and we were using what was already there, and this is what it looks like now. It doesn't have to be a complete replacement. And I think we're not used to that as a society.
Yeah, I would say, you know, people talk about timeless design a lot, and I think just by nature, maybe that's not how we think about spaces right now. I mean, we try to make it timeless, but of course, time change and you don't know what the next trend is going to be. But I think really thinking about the longevity and why you really need something in the space versus it's easier to rip everything out, but being that steward for every material that you put in, like Lisa said, like if you chose it, there must be merits to it. How do you make or extend its life and its useful life? And if not, have a plan for that end of life where it's not going to the landfill. That should be part of the design process, in my opinion, to really think about what the next step would be for this material. And then just in terms of cultural shift, thinking about that design for the next life would be important.
Megan, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also thinking about and this goes back to designing for disassembly, thinking about each product and what the components are and whether all of them need to be replaced is another approach. So the same way that carpet developed tiles so that you could replace just individual tiles, thinking about things like furniture and other upholstery where, I mean, they need to be able to be taken off part of it. So you're not throwing away a metal or high quality wood product just because you got a stain on one part. And that goes the same with, you know, the uglying out problem. It's fine, then change the fabric, but don't get rid of really durable, high quality products before they need to be done. And I think part of it also does come to, you know, talking to owners about whether that needs to happen. And for some, I mean, and some things, you know, yeah, when I was at WeWork, there was a lot of people want their specific brand on every single piece of furniture. And then every time that changes, does that really all need to be turned over? And so that's going to be a longer term cultural shift around when we change a product standard. Do we need to go in and replace every single chair, or can we wait until the end of those chairs' life? Things like that.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you know, it seems like the fundamental way in which our interior design is distinct from maybe the practice of architecture. And I just want to say, even though we've been treating these as two sort of isolated professions, they're of course linked and they're almost, you know, melded into each other these days. But, you know, the thing about interior design or interiors work in general is that, you know, we have to go into the project considering that we're picking up the baton from the last interior designer that touched that space, really having respect for their work as we go into our work. You know, it seems to be a way for us to at least build that culture that all of you have talked about, really, you know, in terms of having respect for the materials that are already there. I'd love to close this out with maybe one thing from each of you that you wish interior designers would start paying more attention to. You've mentioned a lot of things already. You know, just pick one that people can start doing now in their work, you know, to start paying attention now that we know that our work has such a huge impact on climate change.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me is that I meet so many interior designers who are passionate about climate change, but will leave the work of carbon impact of buildings to architects and engineers. And I think that this whole conversation and tools that have come online, like the EC3 tool, you know, it gives you a place to start so that you can actually be part of the conversation, because the impact is huge. The impact is so much bigger in those specifications than what you do in your personal life. So, you know, I'll meet vegans who, like, they do all these amazing things, you know, in their personal life, but then when it comes to spec, it's like, oh, I just never have the right client, you know, so they'll spec whatever. So really just, it's all one life, you know, so if we can tie those things together, we can make huge impact, and we are an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, kind of piggying back on that, I would say the biggest thing I think for interior designers is to know that you have the power and to push yourself into that conversation early on, and set the sustainability goals with your internal team, with the client, and that will really help you in the long run. And this is coming, of course, secondary to really understanding what your own impact is, excuse me, and how you can make that difference.
Yeah, and I'd say if you want to further educate yourself, there are those 2 studies that the Carbon Leadership Forum has done are available. You can download them and look at what those impacts are over time, as well as diving into a specific project. And also think about how, don't assume that your owner doesn't care because they don't know about interiors and embodied carbon. If they have a carbon neutrality commitment that's more around operational, it's an opportunity to talk to them about, what do you know about scope 3 emissions? Did you know that interiors are a really big part of scope 3 emissions? And they're interested in that. They just don't know that there's a misconnect around language. And so I think that there's a lot of conversations to happen around that.
That's a great point.
Right, absolutely. I started this conversation talking about the big commitments that big tech has made in this past year to carbon neutrality or carbon negativity. Salesforce, as part of their commitment, has pledged that 2020 on, every interior space is also going to be assessed for embodied carbon. So there's cultural change on the horizon. It's coming. And I think as a profession, what all of you have shown through your work and your research, your studies, is a path to the rest of us to really start to look at this in our work and to prepare ourselves for an inevitable future. We have 10 years to reverse the impacts of 300 years or so of the Industrial Revolution. There's a lot of carbon dioxide and methane and stuff that we've put in the atmosphere that we need to take back. And interior designers can be a huge part of that. So thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and your time with us today. For everybody who's listening, please go out there, educate yourself. You can do more than you think, and you have a much bigger impact than you realize. Please go to the Carbon Leadership Forum's website. Their study is freely available. Please look at Interface's products. Please start to prioritize low carbon products in your work and start to understand your place within that cyclical renovation cycle and act accordingly, because you have tremendous power because of that. Thank you all so much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I hope the start of a really positive change in our industry. Thank you.